I hope I can be heard.
Yep, we can hear you, Thomas.
All right, great. Well, we'll get started this morning, and what we're offering a prayer for our discussion that we're going to be having today. And I'm really glad to be able to be a part of this. And so what just kind of thinking about how we, begin things with the people that are on the ground today. We can start with the song and give prayers for those ones that are left behind today, and the things that we're talking about that's going to be happening is one of is really important for our survival. Our people relied on it for many years, and it became their life. And in this day and age where we need to um, look upon our past as a guide to our future, and knowing what the um, importance of what our elders saw as necessary, I believe today we need to look back upon that and use that as a guidance, because it can serve as a guide to what our future will become, whether it's the changes in the earth, whether it's the changes in the rivers. All these things bear a message that begin at the time of creation till to this day. And if we fail to look toward those resources, or if we fail to look to those ones that have come before us, then we will fail our future. So now, as we go forward to open this gathering, let us remember those now that are suffering, whether it be in the hospitals with the sicknesses or even the deaths that was caused from that. So we will begin. Krishna's ayayanavatisham Kakiyana me pavana kshashpai Akusyano kalalakai kisham Kusim wana kshash ichanti chamiya Akusyano kalalakai kisham Kusim wana kshash ichanti chamiya Hey, oh, yanam nawata, chokanam nawata, oh, Yes, I know what the shams kakayana mi pawana chashpa. Of course, you know, kalalakai hisham. Kusimwana chash ichanti chamiya. Akusyano kalalakai hisha. Kusimwana chash ichanti chamiya. Hey, oh, yanam nawata. Oh, Kana Nawata, that's okay. Yes, I know what T-shirts, Kakiana Mipawana, wauna chas ichan tichamia. Au kushana kalala kai hisha. Tusim wauna chas ichan tichamia. Hey, ay, hey, ay. Oh, yanam nawata jo, yanam nawata. Hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, hey, oh, hey. Tuesday bayan, kecicitan. And a cool from our class, and a cool she, power of share, and a cook of show, senior, and a tunio atal, Namia, cook complete in the itis, and Nami Sinuit, and a cook of boy like some winter, and a corner, Nami, Tunai, Watak, and a chocolate cake, the Gusti, Nami, quick, to Nami attach. Bakan of Mistuni, what the Nami menas mamia ai ku kan pani ani ai te kui sinui kui te na aras pani au au e ashe tum se imia o nami te pami kuma ku kan mai te ku ana kana na ku pani chasata ni haula te pop vai mama na kuma po ala la ku kan pani atani ai te in chewa para haula ka kai si kana ya Chisho and me, how yasha to Emil, Namika, Family, Monk, Shall Night. Ana, I push it. Out. I watch a cookie.
Yay! Thank you for joining us today for the workshop, and thank you, Thomas. We had some technical difficulties this morning here, and so I would like to call on Brent Spencer. He is the liaison for the Oregon Department of Education.
Good morning, Katrina. I'm here. So are we ready to roll?
Yep, Brent, I've made you a co-host so you're able to share your screen and present once you're ready.
You made me a coho?
Ciao, co-host.
Like a salmon? Like a salmon?
Ciao.
No.
I'm not able to do that.
I got jokes. Anyway, thank you for the welcome, Katrina. I'm excited to collaborate with our tribe. This is my first collaboration, is my new role. Those of you who may not know me, I was formerly working with our education department for over 11 years. And role was as a youth services manager prior to joining the Oregon Department of Education on June 16th. So I'm still fairly new in this role. However, I've been just kind of tossed in with this Senate Bill 13. I guess my official role is an operations and policy analyst under the Oregon Office of Indian Education through the Department of Education. But I go by Indian Education Coordinator. And my primary lift with the department is Senate Bill 13, Tribal History, Shared History. And I'm also lifting Title VI, and I'll also be working with some of the TSP certifications. So that's a lot of my function as the IEC within the Office of Indian Education. And so I was asked here to talk a little bit about Senate Bill 13 and some of our efforts that are ongoing under the Oregon Department of Education, the Office of Indian Ed. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I have some information that I'd like to share with anyone. If you could just let me kind of get through this and hold your questions to the end. I'll try to provide enough time. I think I have until 9:15. Is that right, Katrina? Okay. All righty. Well, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. And we are going to, I think that's the one. If for some reason you cannot hear the audio, please let me know. This is an introductory video that was developed by the Oregon Department of Education, the first efforts that began just after 2017 when Senate Bill 13 was passed under the Oregon legislature. So I'm gonna go ahead and play this for you. It'll provide some information, some background information on Senate Bill 13.
Last year, the state's tribal and education leaders worked together to pass Senate Bill 13, Tribal History, Shared History. This monumental legislation requires that Oregon produce and share essential understandings of Oregon Indians, and then use this information to develop a statewide curriculum relating to the Native American experience in Oregon, including tribal history, sovereignty, culture, treaty rights, government, socioeconomic experiences, and current events. This curriculum will include 45 lesson plans across grades 4, 8, and 10 in English language arts, math, science, social studies, and health. Yet Senate Bill 13 is about so much more. It's an invitation and an opportunity to teach the rich history of our land and its people, and to pair the strengths of our education system, teachers and students, with the new knowledge and content the curriculum will establish.
I'm excited about SB13 because Native American history is U.S. history. Native American influence is often minimized or completely left out. My textbook that we use at my school calls Pocahontas a curious and willing prisoner. And I can't in good consciousness continue perpetuating those myths and stories and really culturally disrespectful.
I'm excited because I feel like there isn't a relationship between Native people and the education system. And with this bill being passed and being implemented in schools, I feel like this is the gateway to building that relationship.
My son so far in his education has had a really positive experience with Title VI in Indian education. That has had a really positive impact on him, just to have his identity validated and reflected in school. There's a lot of potential impacts in my classroom. The first for my Native American students, they could go their entire academic career and never learn positive things about their people. They could only see negative stereotypes. The second impact would be for my non-Native students. They need to see the positive examples so that they're not perpetuating these myths and stories as well.
When teachers are looking for who to reach out to in order to get information and resources regarding Native-based curriculum, they should look to tribes within their area or tribes that are closest to their school district. And you can start by calling the main office, and they will connect you with whoever it may be in their culture department or in their education department to help get you the information that you need.
I know in education we struggle with always having new things to do and integrate into our curriculum. But this is a really important step, and we benefit from multiple perspectives in our history. And so what we need to work together to do is figure out how to integrate this into what we're already teaching and not assume it's something new that replaces something old. But how do we improve our current history curriculum and integrate those perspectives to increase inclusion and make our education system better for all?
Senate Bill 13, our Tribal History, Shared History, has a 2-year rollout plan. Phase 1 has 2 parts to it. The first part is that together between the Department of Education and the 9 tribes, we develop essential understandings to be sure we're aligned throughout the whole project. The second part of Phase 1 is the curriculum development. So each of the 9 tribes has been delivered resources so they can themselves develop a place-based curriculum that is specific to their tribes. Phase 2 then is what we roll into, and this is where we come together with the Oregon Department of Education and the school districts, and we recognize that we have some learning to do in order to implement this curriculum. And the third phase is when teachers go to work in the classroom, they have the background knowledge and they have this new curriculum that's been developed by the tribes, and they begin to work directly with our students I think one thing that's important for us to remember about Senate Bill 13, which sounds like just any other state law, is that it is far more than a state law. Senate Bill 13 is really an agreement between the state of Oregon and its government and the governments of each of the 9 different tribes that reside here in the state. These children that we're teaching this to will be tomorrow's leaders, and they'll shape a brand new future for the state of Oregon and its relationship with each of our tribes.
Our charge as a state is to create the conditions for the implementation of tribal history to be shared history. Those conditions require that teachers receive the support they need so that all students leave school empowered with accurate knowledge about their state. Senate Bill 13 is a long awaited for and fought for gift. What we do with it depends on our will. We have an obligation to Indian students to let them know that their history is no longer deleted. And we have an obligation to non-Indian students to teach the real history and contribution of tribes in Oregon. If we all pull together, we can do it.
So that's a little bit of background about Senate Bill 13. And I think that there was some really good points that were hit within that video. And it was talking about telling the tribe's history and the suggestion by Mercedes Jones that each of these districts reach out to the tribes that are adjacent to them. And I'm sure that a lot of you are already aware of the 9 tribes of Oregon. This kind of shows what their rough geographical area looks like. And I think this is important because my history working with the tribe, the Umatilla tribe, is that we had received some requests from some districts down in Southern Oregon, and they had requested information about the 5 tribes of Oregon. So we feel that it's important to educate our educators about the 9 tribes of Oregon. The Oregon Department of Ed is not going into specifics about each tribe when they develop the curriculum or lesson plans. However, from this point going forward, we will continue to refer to the 9 Oregon tribes. We don't expect educators to be able to name all 9. We hope that that is a result of this curriculum and lesson plans. However, if we maintain that consistency from the state level, hopefully we'll encourage them to do some more investigating on their own and learn more about the 9 Oregon tribes, as opposed to focusing simply on those tribes within their local geographical area. So I put this up here just like I said, to get a rough view of what we have here. And hold on, let's see if I can move this. There we go. There was some discussion about or mentioning about the essential understandings. And this is a view of what the essential understandings look like. And I was actually afforded an opportunity to be a part of the essential understandings development committee. And what this included was representatives from all 9 Oregon tribes, other educators, and representatives of the Oregon Department of Education. And this team met regularly and established these 9 EUs to which the tribes wanted to make sure were included in the lesson plannings developed by the Oregon Department of Education. So essentially, this is the guidance. And we have history, identity, language, genocide, federal policy and laws, treaties with the United States, lifeways, tribal government, and sovereignty. So what these do is these help guide the lesson plans that are currently under development or that were under development. And if you can see, yeah, I'm sharing. Along the side here on these tabs are the lesson plans that are available. We have 4th, 8th, 10th, and we do have a little bit of other background information. We have 5th grade here as well. So there's some information there for educators to take a look at. What I'd like to do is to take a look at one of the lesson plans itself. And this particular lesson plan is focused on Native law and the Supreme Court. So if you'll notice, the way that these lesson plans are established, they all look alike in the sense of format. So this creates an opportunity for educators to have everything laid out for them. It identifies the lesson plans. It identifies the content area. It identifies the essential understandings. In this case, we're looking at tribal government, sovereignty, history, genocide, and federal policy and laws. And it also provides an overview and some background. It identifies what the essential questions are. In this case, they're asking what is the role of the Supreme Court in the United States? And how has the US Supreme Court impacted tribal nations and the lives of Native Americans? And now if we look further down, we'll also identify the content area or the standards, the Oregon social science standards that are being covered in this particular lesson plan. We have those outlined right here. So I won't go too much further into the lessons. I would invite that you take a look if you're interested. There are multiple, well, there's 45 lesson plans currently available through the Oregon Department of Education, and other lesson plans are currently under development. And myself and Nguyen Long, she is a doctoral candidate who is an intern for the ODE. And she and I have met with multiple teams across these multiple content areas to work on the establishment of the other lesson plans for these remaining grades. And what our focus on these is that we make sure that we include each of these essential understandings and we tie everything back to the standards under each of these content areas. So we've met with the teams from the English language arts, we've met with teams from math, PE health, science, and social studies. And each of these groups have been providing us some feedback on how we can create lesson plans that are tied to content areas, but also include the essential understandings. Now, there's going to be some outreach to some of the tribes for some information. For example, the ODE has reached out to the Umatilla tribe and requested some data sets. And what those data sets might look like is we may look at some water quality data that may be included in some math lesson planning. We've made some requests on some traditional foods information that might be related to PE and the health, or maybe the social studies lesson plans that are under development. So all of those things are underway at the moment. And each of the 9 Oregon tribes is currently or has submitted their lesson plans that are specifically tied to the tribes and the areas in which they want to include in their lesson planning. The ODE, when it comes to looking at the development of our lesson plans, is taking a 50,000-foot view, in the sense that we want to include all 9 Oregon tribes and not go into specifics of each tribe, not without collaborating with the tribe. So when you look at these lesson plans, they're kind of all over the board, and each of the districts, once Senate Bill 13 is underway, will be able to choose from these lessons and incorporate into their existing curriculum within their schools. Now, where do we go from here? Well, as the tribes continue to submit their lesson plans, we'll be going through those and matching them with this layout. So everything will look similar and will flow seamlessly between lesson plan to lesson plan, and hopefully provide all of our educators with the information that they need to roll out, especially the tribes' lesson plans, to be able to roll those out in a way that's respectful to the lessons, but it's also respectful to the tribe. So that's about it that I have right now in terms of information sharing. I'd like to take these last few minutes to open it up for some questions. I know that I've covered a lot. Are there any questions out there, or any clarification that folks would like to to see regarding what I presented to you today? If you don't mind, I'm going to stop sharing my video. I'm kind of having some connection issues, so I'm sure you guys are tired of seeing my face anyway. So, but I'm still here for questions. I guess I have a question to those educators that are involved in today's discussion. Have any of you had an opportunity to roll out any of these lesson plans? If so, were they successful? If not, is there any advice or feedback that you can provide to us on how we can maybe change them or provide more information, other professional development on how to successfully roll out these lesson plans? And I understand if you did not have an opportunity, we recognize that across the state, COVID did have a big impact on the delivery of our lesson plans. There was a lot of focus on, I guess, the core curriculum. So some of these lesson plans did not get rolled out, but I'm just curious if you had an opportunity to roll any of these out, if you could provide some feedback on maybe how those went.
Hey, Brent.
Yes.
This is Katrina. I had an opportunity to train the trainers with the Milton Free Water School, and I went through the presentation, and I invited Fred Hill to come to the presentation as well. And the feedback I got from the principal was that they really wanted to visit with Fred or myself to get more in depth about the lesson plans, the delivery. So I think that's what teachers would probably want, is to maybe, collaborate with the local tribes or the traditionalists. And so, our services here, we're offering to Milton Freewater and the surrounding school districts because we have a really good team here, with Thomas, Mildred, Fred, Damien, the other staff too, to help with the local schools, to educate them, to let them feel comfortable about asking questions, with our elders and our team here, and and other people within the tribe. So that's one of the things that I got from Milton Freewater. So, but anyways, I just want to thank everybody for coming today to join us, and us as the language program, the CTUIR is reaching out, for our children, so our teachers can teach them about the 9 tribes, the CTUIR. But anyway, so I think it's just having them connect with their local tribes and to feel okay and comfortable with asking questions and asking for help. That's all I have to say.
And Katrina, I think that's a great statement. From the ODE perspective, that's what we're looking for. We want that collaboration between tribes and school districts. And I have continued to advocate, or I guess champion, the Umatilla tribe and talk about the relationship that the tribes have established with their local school districts, and have brought up the MOUs that are in place, and how the level of collaboration is exactly where everyone would like to see that. But unfortunately, that relationship is not the same around the state. There are some districts that don't have that quality of relationship, and we're hoping that by rolling out these lesson plans, that we'll be able to facilitate at least some discussion between the tribes and the districts, and hopefully create a better quality of relationship between the tribes and the districts. tribes view students as a resource. And what ODE wants to see is that districts create opportunities for parents and for students, and to increase that engagement between parents and students, and also support these lesson plans, in the sense that they'll create other opportunities and will maybe move away from performance type of grading, offer opportunities for parents to provide meaningful feedback, support of student activities, supporting of like tribal or Native American clubs in their districts. So we're hoping that we can help facilitate that from the state level. Katrina, you're muted.
I knew that. Okay, here's a question from Thomas. What will the differentiation of treaty and executive order tribes in these lessons?
The lessons are going to focus on the 9 federally recognized tribes of Oregon. We understand that there are some tribes that aren't recognized, and ODE is going to stay away from that political debate. We want to focus on the 9 federally recognized tribes, and those are the ones that are included in these lesson plans, that have been included in these lesson plans and will be included in our lesson plans. Does that answer your question, Thomas?
Looks like he might have moved away from his workstation. Katrina, is he?
Did that answer your question?
Hello, this is Anton. Can I make a statement?
Yeah.
Who's running the meeting? Yeah, hey, I just want to make a comment regarding education in the state of Oregon, regarding Indian tribes, Native Americans. I went to grade school in the 1940s at St. Andrews Catholic school, nun teacher. The teachers were nuns, sisters. And when it came to history, the teachers kind of looked over the students, which were all Native American CTUIR members, and they talked about the history that they were aware of, which was the Whitman massacre, and that was the extent of the Indian tribal history. And the sisters kind of looked over the students that were there and said, well, some of you are probably the descendants of that Whitman massacre. But I just want to emphasize the SB13, get it right and get the history right for all schools across the state of Oregon. And you said the 9 tribes. Okay, what's the background of those 9 tribes? And get it right. The SB13 staff, who's ever doing this study, get it right. That's all.
Anton, this is Brent Spencer. Thank you for your words. Definitely taking those to heart.
Thank you, Anton. Also, thank you, Brent, for being here with us today on behalf of the ODE department. And if you guys have any questions, contact Brent His information is on the website for SB13 as well. And our next guest that we have here is Lindsey Watchman, and he is the chairman of the General Council.
All right, there we go. So first of all, Tatsmewi, Nick Maitsky, Kushia Skwepa. My name is Lindsey Watchman. I am for the tribe right now. I have been elected to the tribal council. I am chairman of the general council. I'm also wearing, as you can see, my U of O ribbon shirt. I earned this ribbon shirt like all of us educators do. I received my master's in education from the University of Oregon. I graduated in 2010 from the Subsequently Native American Teacher Program in the U of O College of Education. My endorsement areas are social studies, middle school, high school, social studies, and English endorsement and ESOL endorsement. So there are two things. I served time in the Air Force 7 years, did a lot of training there, but of all the content that I've taught over the last 25 years, the one that I enjoy most is sharing with our local school districts and our local partners, whether they be political or health and human services, information about the tribe, just a little bit of the history, and then how we got to our modern form of government. And truly, ultimately, the point is to show our partners the capacity that the tribe has already built and what capacity and future partnerships that the tribe could have with our external agencies. So again, I want to thank the Oregon Department of Education today. We've lent now 2 of our tribal members to the department. Again, I've been on working with ODE for a long time, getting April Campbell position, funding their mascot issues have been on the table for a long time. But today my focus is, and I'll get to it, is providing you a little bit of information about our tribal government. Again, as an elected official, this is something that I appreciate doing. So I want to thank Katrina and Brent for allowing me this time with you all today. So as you see on the screen, go ahead and flip to the next screen. So again, we're all somewhat familiar with this map, just bringing attention to the top row. As you can see, as the West was settled, initially it was all indigenous populations here. Then you see the 13 colonies, then you see Louisiana Purchase. And then of course, we're gonna talk about how the West was settled with treaties. But again, you see in the middle of the screen there, that also places the tribal reservations on a map as well, so you can quickly take a visual. And as you will see, as you can notice, majority of the reservations are west of the Mississippi, or anything that is big enough to show up on a map of this scale. So I want to test everybody, see who's awake real quick in the chat box. And I want educators, please, I'd like for you to put in the chat box. If this doesn't work right, I'll skip this, but I want to do some interactive real quick. We already know that there are 9 tribes in Oregon. How many tribes in Washington? Quickly in your chat box. Anybody? We'll see if anybody. 26. Thanks, Thomas. Anybody else want to throw in a guess? How many in Idaho? And then how many in the United States? So just throw out your answers there. It's important for us to do some context. All right. We got 1 participant on the chat line. That's fine. Sometimes this works, sometimes it don't. I see 4. All right, Thomas is in there. Thank you, Katrina. We got some numbers. Thank you, Coquine, for guesting there. All right. Oregon, we know has 9. That's what we need to know for today, right? But Washington, our state to the north, has 29 federally recognized tribes. Thanks, Zach. Idaho has 4, actually. And overall, across the United States, including Alaska villages, there are 574 federally recognized tribes. So again, that's kind of Indian 101 right there. How many are there? How many tribes are there and how many people? So again, we're just over 5 million according to the we haven't seen the 2020 census numbers yet, but according to the 2010, there's over 5 million Americans who identify themselves as either Native American only or in combination with another race, including myself. I have Finnish blood. I'm a Native in combination with another race. So that's the volume. Okay. So again, and again, especially out here in the West, it's very important to include what happened in your local region. That's part of the context. All right, so we're going to start with a couple words that are very important. Again, you always hear tribes standing on this term sovereignty. Okay, it's even hard to spell, let alone understand, but I'm going to try and make it as easy as possible. The word sovereign, like when after the American Revolution, we declared our independence as a sovereign, right, to Britain, a declaration of independence, okay, for our own autonomous, for our own rule. That's the early founding of this country. All right. In the treaty, or excuse me, in the US Constitution, it says that treaties are the supreme law of the land. Okay. So a treaty, again, some synonyms there on the screen you can see there: agreement, contract, accord, pact, truce, settlement, handshake. The
Lindsey,
definition of it, yeah.
have you moved ahead in the presentation?
I am on mine. Sorry. What next screen? I'm sorry, 3. Now you're
All
on
good.
4. I forgot that I wasn't driving. I'm driving on my end.
All good.
I apologize. Thank you, buddy. All right. So what's a treaty? A treaty, right there, definition is a contract written between 2 or more political authorities as states or sovereigns. Okay. Again, that example of Treaty of Paris, NATO, 1949, again, to stop the proliferation of nuclear weapons, you know. All right. So the concept is sovereign. Treaties see themselves as sovereigns, 574 sovereigns. And those sovereigns in the past, in our case, 1855, which we'll get to, as a sovereign, negotiated with the United States government through its Oregon and Washington territory superintendents to sign a treaty. Okay, so let's, next slide, common treaty provisions, please. So most provisions in treaties, again, there was a relinquishment or a ceding of traditional lands. Okay, it wasn't a giving, it wasn't a taking. This is a peace treaty. It's not a war treaty. Difference between our treaty, a war treaty, is somebody's conquered, somebody's surrendered, somebody's thrown the white flag up. This was a peace treaty. The treaty was signed not under war. It was signed because there had already prior been a Cayuse War. And with the influx of the Oregon Trail and the settlers in this area, there needed to be a mechanism, some way to separate living areas between the increasing settlers and the tribal people who were already here. Again, and I'll show you how much land in a few moments in a map, and you'll start to understand how much of a relinquishment that the tribes gave up locally so that there would be safe living arrangements in this area. So again, we reserved our rights. There are reserved rights, and this is very important. Again, those reserved rights in that treaty negotiation in 1855 said, if we're going to move to this smaller reservation, we still want access. We're reserving our right to still access our traditional resources in northeastern Oregon and southeastern Washington. The term is usual and accustomed areas. And that term even goes all the way down the Columbia River to where we have fishing sites and loose sites, and any place that we used to traditionally and have identified as a traditional use area. So the federal government said, great, we'll protect the reservation, we'll create this trust responsibility. We will also provide medical care, housing, food rations, farming equipment, schooling, a meal, all of these things, because again, if you're talking about a group of people who are used to throughout a seasonal year, moving after different games, roots and berries, now you're putting them on a small chunk of land, they're going to have to find another way to subside. Again, the federal government at that time said that these are the things that we will provide to the people of the reservation so that you can get up and running on your reservation. Okay. Next slide, treaty confirmation. So then our treaty was signed. So again, you got all these immigrants, and now you have Oregon territory, you have Washington territory. This treaty precedes the statehood of the United States, or of Oregon, which is 1859. This treaty was signed over a 2-week period of time in May and June of 1855. So you have representatives of the government, Oregon Territory, Isaac Stevens from Washington and Joel Palmer from Oregon. Okay, so these two individuals, again, the wagon train goes all the way to the coast, and then they start backing up and seeing all these different lands that they wanted to settle. So there's kind of a reverse migration that occurred. So again, you got all this conflict happening in the Willamette Valley, up in Seattle area, up and down the coast. Again, same situation everywhere in the West. We need to find a way for the people to live peacefully, the newcomers and the old timers. Okay, so the reservation and the treaty was signed in June of 1855. 4 years later, the state of Oregon was entered into the Union. All right. So again, one of those, how come the tribes don't have to work with the states? Why do they have a direct relationship with the federal government, a direct responsibility? And why is the relationship with the state voluntary? Because this treaty was signed with the federal government. State of Oregon later came to be. State of Washington later came to be. Okay, so that's important. Grandfather clause, however you want to look at a treaty, was already signed with the federal government. Okay, now the states, of course, have to fall in line with how that federal policy direction is going. All right, so again, on the screen there, CTUIR Treaty of 1855, it has a picture of 4 Stoke Indians on there. Next screen, I think. There you go. And again, we brought together bands. We weren't tribes by those names at the time. Okay, we had different names for ourselves. These were names were easier to say in English and were carried over to local geographies. But again, at that same negotiation, the reservations in Yakima, as well as the Nez Perce Reservation in Idaho, was formed. Okay, so 3 reservations were created in Washington, Idaho, and Oregon from this 1 2-week proceeding. In our situation, we ceded over 6.4 million acres. That's what you'll see in a second. And the next map is our seasonal round. At the negotiation, it was down to just over 510,000 acres that we reserved. There were some surveys that occurred, including the Meacham survey. Then you had, which you'll see on our map, a straight line on our eastern boundary. And then due to allotments and the Dawes Act and selling of land, we are currently just under 180,000 acres. Next slide. Should be the density map. There you go. Go back one real quick. Sorry, I'm looking at 2 screens. So again, you see, so what that is, it's a density map saying the darker it is, the more time we spend in that area. So again, as you can see, the people who decided to make this decision are treaty signers to 500,000 acre, again, having free roam of all this territory up to Canada, almost North Dakota, all the way down to California. Okay, we're saying we've negotiated, restrict ourselves to the smaller area here in Mission, Oregon. Next slide. So that green area that you see on the screen, that is the 6.4 million acres. That was our original ceded territory. That was our original seasonal round. As you can see, we went up to Hanford area, just on this side of the river, and had roots, medicine, and herbs up there, all the way down to Spanish Peak in South Central Oregon, Southeastern Oregon. You got Ontario, and then of course you follow Mountain Ridge. Again, that was the reserved area that we still have our usual custom access to. So again, you got to work in partnership with lots of agencies to have that access. But nevertheless, as you see on the map, that pink area in the middle is our current reservation. So again, just for visual and context, longitudinal context is important. Next slide. So basically, Initially, there was extermination, colonization, then the Removal Act, then Indian Wars, and then Dawes Allotment Act. You know, and we're moving through these different federal policies. I won't spend much time on this, but the point is the government got in and out of the taking care of Indian business throughout the 19th century. You have Indian Reorganization Act in 1934. And again, the tribes wanted to gain some of their own autonomy, sovereignty over their own affairs. And then in 53, some tribes are just straight out terminated. The government again says we need resources, and they started looking for tribes that had resources. And a lot of the tribes in Oregon, Western, especially along the valley, because of their timber, were terminated. You know, and that brings upon its own kind of self-identity and historical trauma that we won't be able to get into today. But again, what really turned around in 1974 is the ability for tribes under NAHASDA to be able to go after state and federal grants and to apply for needs that their communities have, whether it's housing, whether it's education, whether it's health services, but that tribes can finally, as nonprofit agencies, organize themselves so that they can apply for grants just like any county or a Gabby House or anybody else could do. So again, that's really what's helped kickstart our all reservation economies is that NAHASDA in 74. All right, so next slide is 1949. So we signed our current constitution and bylaws in 1949, and it created our a modern form of government. The General Council, again, I'm chairman of the General Council. Mr. Anton Minthorn, who we heard earlier, was had this very similar role, had this role for over 18 years. So I'm kind of preaching to the choir a little bit here in regards to that gentleman, and I hope I do well by our organization. So again, the General Council is all of those tribal members who are 18 and over. So right now we have a little over 2,300 of our tribal members are part of the General Council, and every 2 years they vote for their 9-member governing body. 8 members of the General Council. Go ahead and next slide. I'll show you some pictures of them in a moment. So again, that Constitution again broke us up into our current form of government. Just so you know how many people we're taking care of, we have tribal members of just over 3,100. A large percentage of them are elders or young. Okay, and again, half of our reservation residents live off the reservation. Sorry, half of our tribal members live off the reservation. But of course, we have other tribal members from other tribes as well as non-tribal members. We have our own enrollment office that maintains those certificates of Indian blood to make sure that again, it's very difficult to become a member of a Native American tribe. Each tribe has their own qualifications for enrollment in their tribe. And again, that's an example and exercise of sovereignty. You're determining as a governing body what your requirements for membership are. So again, we have an enrollment office, and that gets fact checked with the BIA. So again, and there's a picture of Mr. Minthorn right there. And John, I don't know how old that picture is, and I apologize. I'm sure there are members there. I actually see one there that has passed away, a former tribal member, tribal leader. But ever since Anton's days, the attitude has always been to negotiate, not litigate, the best that we could. And again, obviously, if you litigate, the lawyers and the court systems get a lot of money, and the 2 parties, 2, 3, 4 parties that could be negotiating, that money isn't being used in their local community. So again, the CTUIR has made it a priority to work with its local stakeholders, whether it's school or in education, school districts, whether it's natural resources like our fish, bringing our salmon back. And again, we have the Oregon government cluster that Brent and Oregon Department of Education is a part of. Again, at all levels, we have the cities, all these local cities around us, the county. Obviously this COVID is a county-wide issue, and for Umatilla County, quite different. We're on the government to government page. Again, we meet with, again, the governor and all those people like we are today, Oregon Department of Education, just let them know how we can be involved. So again, our tribal government, legislative, executive, and judicial branch. There's go ahead and go to the picture of the Board of Trustees. Next one. There you can see the individuals who are our current Board of Trustees. Go ahead and go to the slide right above it, please. The one with the org chart. So if you can see that org chart, I know depending on your screen size, it may or may not be easy to get to. But I wanted to just walk through this real quick. And if we were in person, I had handouts for you so that you'd have a hard copy of this document. But you see at the top, it says General Council. And again, I mentioned that General Council is all tribal members who are 18 and over, basically your electorate. And again, we have the Constitution bylaws that were created in 1949. You can clearly see there a system of checks and balances. You have the Board of Trustees, which is your legislative branch there in pink. You have your judicial branch, tribal court off to the right. And then below the Board of Trustees, you have your executive branch. And of course, we have an executive director. That is not our latest chart, but I'm going to go off my chart here. So we have an executive director and we also have a deputy director. The executive director has actually split those duties on the screen with the deputy director. So just imagine that whole left column has the deputy director. But again, our organization has grown so very big. Our operating budget is now almost $350 million. So myself, as one member of the Board of Trustees, with our industries and our enterprises, the tribe, we employ over 1,700 employees. That's huge. We're the largest employer east of the Cascades. You have a 300, there's no other organization or business other than the state of Oregon. You know, we passed them up several years ago in regards to operating budget and employees. But again, quite, if you were to be on the city council, whether it was Weston or Pendleton or Walla Walla, I think Walla Walla has a closer budget to what we have. But, you know, that's quite a bit of responsibility. I'm not saying that for myself, but for all Board of Trustees members and all the executive management and staff that have to carry out these essential, you know, health and human services. So again, let's look at that. We're going to stay on that org chart because I want to go down it. So again, the tribe as a capacity, as a government, it'd be important for all of our educators to recognize that it's a government, not just a population, you know, of slightly darker on average skin tones, but we are a community. We are a government. We are a business entity. Everything that a city is, the CTUIR is also. You can see that by our organizational chart. We, of course, have an IT department. We have our own enrollment department for all the services to our direct services to our tribal members. We have a Department of Public Safety. That Department of Public Safety includes the fire department, includes tribal police, includes emergency management in the county, hazard mitigation plans, even our own casino. If there were to be a big fallout at Hanford, but the Umatilla Chemical Depot, or even during this COVID, you know, there's a chance that the casino can be marshaled, you know, by the state and used as a staging area during a major disaster. You know, we're prepared for that. We have capacity, we have staff. We already work with the county when there are situations, fires, you know, emergency response issues. Okay, so that's important. We have those. We don't use the services in city of Pendleton unless we can't handle those with our own capacity. We have our own Department of Children and Family Services, just like the state has a Department of Health and Human Services. We doing child welfare, veterans, government assistance. This department has been huge this last year and a half in providing food handouts to our community. And that's handouts to the entire reservation community, not just tribal members. Domestic violence, again, that we all know if you've been in DHHS, that's a important field. Economic and community development, right? Community development, we have housing needs, we have enterprise needs, casino needs, future expansion needs. We have our own Department of Public Works. We maintain our own roads. We have our own equipment. The needs that we have on the reservation aren't a burden on the city of Pendleton. Those assistance social service programs that community members need in the city of Pendleton, often those tribal members turn to our own internal programs to take care of their temporary needs. Housing, we manage our own housing, almost 200 units, housing, low income, market rate, scattered site housing, and planning. We moved along to the other side of that, communications, radio station, newspaper, obviously finance. You got to have a big department with an operating budget that big. Human resources, our legal counsel. We have legal counsel that is watching things that are happening here local. We have lobbyists in Oregon, in Salem. We have in Olympia. We have them in Washington, D.C. because there are always policies that are out there on the table, and sometimes they don't have a Native perspective at that table. And again, it's no policy for us without us mentality. Again, we have the capacity to help any policy be implemented as well. And it's a lot easier if we're part crafting that policy, from the outset. Again, Tovey Cultural Institute, that's where we would have met earlier today, or we would have met today if we didn't go Zoom. And again, that's a very beautiful building, a lot of strength in there, a lot of old items in there. Tovey is an opportunity. We are the only museum or institute. Again, we didn't want to say museum because a museum has a connotation of past tense. When you see a museum, it's 10,000 years ago. There's plenty of museums that already have that that approach to telling the Native American story. But Tovey is owned and operated by the tribe, by Bobby Connor as director. And again, it's an opportunity for us to tell our story our way. We were, we are, we will be. Again, so in the past, when I had a role similar to Brent's here on the res, partnered up with Bobby, and they used to have an event called Teacher Night Out. So that was one opportunity for our local school districts to meet at Tovey, go through, have a meal, see other educators, and pick up some CEUs. So, and again, I hope you all get some CEUs for today as well. So again, looking at that just chart, natural resources, again, our largest department. We've been fighting for our first food since they were first threatened, and that includes the salmon and water. Water and salmon are very expensive to protect, so that means from our waters here, our hatcheries and the staff it takes and the litigation and all of the people who care about water and dams and hydropower or salmon, from here to the ocean and back are all stakeholders. So again, our Department of Natural Resources, we have from watershed here, the Umatilla, all the way to, up to the mountains, 6,000 square feet. So that's quite a bit of responsibility. And again, 180,000 acres that we partner with the state of Oregon and the Bureau of Indian Affairs to protect the land, even for non-tribal members that have land out here on the reservation. Tribal court is the slide I'd be on right now. Ooh, got really big, at least for my house is in mine now. There we go. So again, we have our own autonomous tribal court. You see Chief Bill Johnson up in the top right corner. We won't get into this, as this is a whole lesson in and of itself. And talking about the different kinds of jurisdictions, when you have a checkerboarded reservation like we do, not all reservations are checkerboarded, but what checkerboarded means, you got different ownership. You've got tribal trust ownership, you have individual tribal member ownership, and you've also got Umatilla County resident ownership, non-tribal member ownership. So you could be on tribal land and then tribal members land and then a non-tribal members land, just, chasing one deer, so, if there's a criminal activity there, which jurisdiction is going to take care of what matters, and that's actually, there's a lot to determine before you figure out which court is going to hold that perpetrator accountable. So again, that's a lesson in and of itself. But again, it is a challenge. And again, we have our own tribal court primarily to make sure that we manage our own tribal members. But our tribal members, our tribal system did get a big boost because in the past we were not able to hold non-tribal members accountable for certain crimes. However, that jurisdiction has expanded, and we are, especially in domestic violence situations where a non-tribal member is inflicting injury on a tribal member, we have now the opportunity and teeth to make sure that that issue is addressed, completely. So again, I shared with you, there's an interesting, this is how that 1,700 employees are broken down on the screen. Then it says our workforce. Yeah, next one. So on there, again, you can see those 1,700 employees. Again, Wild Horse, of course, the biggest employer. We're actually creeping almost, over 900. And there's about 86% of our employees at Wild Horse are not tribal members. 15% out of 900 employees are tribal members. A lot of opportunities up there. Again, when you employ that many individuals, you're a big player in the region. You're doing a lot of taxes of the wages and salaries. All those go to the government or local government, to the county, and they go to the state of Oregon. I use technologies. Again, they've gone somewhat remote. Yellowhawk, 150 employees. Again, it just so you know, that chart shows that we have a lot of room for a lot of jobs and need for non-tribal members and their special skills as well. How decisions are made. Just real quickly, we have commissions and committees. Again, committees are advisory, commissions are regulatory. Again, as you can see, go on the regulatory commission slide. There you go, and off to the right, you can see those are some pretty important. Again, commissions have regulatory authority. So our elections need to be standalone, our fish and wildlife, our gaming needs to have, separation from the tribe, for inclusion purposes. So again, just like the United States government, you take a topic, you send it down to subcommittees, you have a lot of experts and staff, community members who are working on it, representatives, they come back with a motion or some ideas and the greater body kind of approves it. So that's what the board does. It allows topics to be vetted through its commissions and committees and internal review. And when it's ready, somewhat ready to go, then it'll be presented to the board for a blessing or any last tweaking of the direction, vision, so that it's copacetic with other visions. A lot of opportunity for our community members to be engaged with their tribal government. Economic diversification. So again, there he is again. What a good looking gentleman right there. Anton Minthorn, Oregon Business Tribes 2.0. I think this is October 2007, if I can see it right. But again, we are not, as you see on that list, there's another page coming, but we started off with the grain elevator. The Wild Horse opened up in 1994, Tomaslik, and then all these other areas, the golf course, the hotel, Arrowhead, Mission Market. Next slide, and you'll see a continuation of, economic diversification that we've had. Wind energy, and then Coyote Business Park, up there by where the truck stop is. There's lots of areas for lease and businesses to set up there. Next slide, you'll see the map. There you go. So again, there's opportunities on the reservation for businesses to come in and partner. Again, grow our little community just like any other little town. Expansion of community services. again, as I mentioned, if you're a government, any size government, you're responsible for all these social issues. We have a new clinic that opened a couple years ago, a radio station. It was, many of you know about Kayak. It's the free regional public bus service. Again, that started as just a need that the tribe had to get to some of our walkers off the road between here and town. One bus, 3 trips to town, to the employment office, to Walmart, and I think to the library. You know, and now it's turned into 6 or 7 buses serving Walla Walla, Tri-Cities, LeGrand, Pendleton, and everywhere in between. So again, that's a free service. Again, partnering with, again, outside agencies, Oregon Department of Transportation, Washington Department of Transportation, something that the tribe started on its own to take care of its own. Example of its sovereignty, started its own transportation system, and then grew and grew and grew. And now I think last year we reached 1 million ridership. So again, it's well used by a lot of our community members in this region, not just tribal members who need to get back and forth, who don't have the funds or the vehicle to get there themselves. And that picture that you see on the screen there, that's our governance center, the NGC. Again, that's our symbol of nationhood, is the way I look at it. You want to come do business with our tribe, you're going to come to this beautiful building, and all of our departments are in there. And again, that's where the Board of Trustees and the General Counsel also reside. And then the next, and it says that that's kind of a old slide there, but the next slide, education achievements. Again, we started our own Nikiawe Community School. It's a high school back during the charter movement of the early 2000s. I am very honored to say that I'm a founding board member of Nikiawe School. It took a lot of work to get sponsored by the Pendleton School District and ultimately the state of Oregon. But again, the impetus for us is that we wanted, just like we are today, we knew that there was curriculum, we knew that there was topics, we knew that there was depth and breadth to the subject of Indians in Oregon today, right? That, you know, that we can bring to our whomever. A charter school is open to everybody. Second year, we had 2 Korean or South Korean students, exchange students. It was awesome, you know. So it's an open public school. Always have had the goal of going 6 through 8 and ultimately K through 12. But we've been very successful as a charter high school on the reservation. Again, the whole goal was, instead of teaching Spanish or French, we were just going to teach Umatilla, Walla Walla, and Cayuse. You know, we're going to teach the drum and singing instead of a trumpet or the piano. Whole point, the whole initiative of starting our own school so that we could tribalize the curriculum. At the very least, our perspective on these topics. So again, I think I applaud everybody at Nikiawe Community School, every teacher, every student, every school board member for making Nikiawe Community School successful. Charter high schools in the 2000s had an average 3 to 5 year lifespan. And here we are at year 17. So, and I remember back then that we were Oregon Department of Education, I think it was 2004 is when they had the Indians in Oregon Today curriculum. So that's a predecessor to what we're developing today under SB13. So I'm dating myself a little bit, but I remember having these same meetings with that Oregon, with that curriculum, and hoping that the local school districts would utilize that as a curriculum, or at least reach out to the tribes. One of the things school districts don't always know is that the local tribes have the capacity, they have the educators, they have the education, a Department of Education with staff who could come out and help supplement the curriculum, co-teach it, or teach it outright. So again, that's, I think, also one of the benefits of what Brent and ODE is doing today, is making connections for y'all, local connections, so that you can expand your curriculum down the road as well. So getting close to the end of my slides here, again, I just want to push, that our education department has focused a lot on the preservation of our tribal languages and the revitalization of that. And I've been successful in many ways of doing that. Again, the tribe, just ending on an education related note, we have, our after school programs that complement the during the day school programs. There's year-round recreation. We have the truancy officers are employed by the tribe. Title VI counselors, again, we applied for that grant and we deployed those counselors out and organize and manage those, rather than in other models in another school district. There's one Title VI counselor and they fly that position, and hopefully you get a tribal member in there or someone who has Title VI experience working with tribal students. But again, and we have, of course, higher education scholarships. So I would say that, the tribe, CTUIR, and all tribes, of course, you can't build your community, you can't keep your culture, you can't keep your traditions live and strong without an educational base. And every tribal member, in closing, again, I've been trying to push, pull, and drag and set up community colleges and universities so that it's a native-friendly environment. Because it's very hard for our students to leave the reservation. We're very close knit. All the challenge that the non-native students we have, on top of, again, that close knit relationship that you have to kind of break through to pursue your own interests in education. And again, I want to close. I was a young man in the Air Force overseas in 95, 96, 97. And I remember reading in our tribal newspaper, the CUJ, every month, Anton Minthorn, he was chairman of the general council, had a chairman's corner. And I remember over and over and over, every message he would say, go get your education and then bring it back to use on behalf and to benefit your people. So as a young man, when I got out of the Air Force in 98, I came back, went to school at YOU and been home for the most part, trying to learn about what it is to be a member of this tribe. And then also, on the other hand, trying to help our non-native partners understand the beauty, the resilience, as well as the capacity that at least the CTUIR has today. So with that, you can just splash on my Q&A page there if you have any questions.
This is Anton. I have a comment.
Sir?
It's a good presentation. What the accomplishments of the CTUIR or Umatilla tribe could never happen without sovereignty and self-governance, and with a strong economy that generates a lot of revenues for investment purposes. That's how we achieve what we've got right now. And sovereignty is the freedom to make our own decisions or be self-governing. And that's just something that the children have to understand. I'm just making that statement. You're doing a good job, Lindsey. That's all.
Thank you. Any other questions? Comments? Well, not hearing any. I did email this presentation. A couple old slides are outdated, but apologize for that. But again, I just want to leave you all with the impression that, our students, if you think of this in generations, there's a few generations who didn't, as teachers, as well as when they were students, didn't get this information about the tribes, even though we're only a few miles away from each other. And the reason why it's valuable, it has nothing to do with race, but because our students are going to be interacting with each other when they become adults. You know, and if they're learning about the capacity now, then they'll know that that's what they can work with in the future. And again, so again, when I leave the classroom, I'm not there for race relations. I'm there for capacity building. Share some information that you may not know, but the whole goal is ultimately that the tribes have been working hard. The tribal members have been working hard. They are maintaining their own city, their own, you know, community. They're finding ways to pay for those themselves without depending on the county or the city of Pendleton or the state of Oregon. We compete for the dollars, you know, based on need, just like any community has. And then again, and as Anton mentioned, we have a vision, we have a direction that we want to go, and we need our younger generation to know that vision and gaining the tools and the education to help us reach there. And again, that also requires partnerships, you know, with our school districts, you know, and our other governments and our neighbors. So with that, I want to thank you all for being good neighbors, taking the time today to, you know, learn about this topic. And again, thank you, Brent, ODE, and thank you, CTUIR Education Department for inviting me. Yes, hello.
Thank you, Lindsey, and the presentation. It was very good, informative for the community. And so our next guest that we have here is on board is Thomas Morningow. He's a master speaker historian here at the language program, and he's also an interpreter for the General Council. And the topic he's going to share about today is the CTUIR Treaty of 1855 and sovereignty. So whenever you're ready, Thomas.
Nick Weissy, can I be heard now? Okay, great. Okay, what I'm going to talk about, and I'm just going to get right on into it, is my concept of what we talk about as sovereignty. We hear it at every conference that's ever sponsored by any tribal organization, whether it be at General Council, then it goes on to the Board of Trustees. We always talk about sovereignty. Well, what does it really mean? Is it something that we can espouse to guide our lives on an everyday basis? Well, in a way, I believe yes, and it's got to be. In that we talk about sovereignty. And here on the Umatilla Reservation, when we do that, when we talk about sovereignty, we say one thing on one side of our mouth, but turn around and give all of the legislative and lawmaking ability to the state. Rather than developing our own laws, we just kind of piggyback what's out there, not even doing any of our own legislation for ourselves, trying to be sovereign. Yeah, you can talk it, but you don't do it. And that's the thing that I would like to touch upon, because in the Treaty of 1855 that was negotiated at Walla Walla, our people at that time were truly sovereign. They were not wards of the government. They were not someone to be lightly pushed aside. They were standing for what they believed in at that time as Native nations. The Umatilla tribe, the Walla Walla tribe, Cayuse tribe, brought the negotiations to end. They were just about derailed the whole thing by the leadership of one of the Cayuse tribal leaders at that time, Young Chief. And when he stood to proclaim his sovereignty at that time, he forced the United States negotiators to reconsider and create a third reservation, Now that was standing up for something that he believed in and not taking no for an answer. That was sovereignty. Since that time, our tribal sovereignties have been negotiated away to a point where we've been impacted by negative policies that were created by the United States, whether it's taking the language, whether it's the education, and things that are encapsulated in our treaties, such as education, such as health, such as commerce. These type of things that we need to regulate on ourselves are being shirked by our current administration because we think it's much more easier and valid to just go through and accept what was written before by the state of Oregon. Per se, the traffic code, for example, here on this reservation. And rather than writing our own, we just adopted the state of Oregon. And then by that, through the auspices of gaining that, rather than reviewing any of the amendments that come down, we just automatically accept them as they're accepted by the state of Oregon. That's not sovereign. But then what I'd like to speak about is that as a tribal nation, we were the caretakers, we were the wards of this land prior to 1855. Our tribes were self-sufficient. We didn't have a standing army. We didn't have a standing police force, but we had laws that governed our way of life. Although they were unwritten, they were accepted and followed. And they were, recognized by the communities by which they were governing. And by the Treaty of 1855, by the grace and good intentions of Governor Isaac Stevens or the negotiating party, they didn't create us by the stroke of a pen. Oh yeah, we're going to be so beneficial that we're going to allow you to exist, in the United States. No, the sovereignty issue with the Treaty of 1855 is where our leadership at that time actually gave the right to the United States, not the state of Oregon, not the state of Washington, but the United States to exist within our homelands. We recognize that right of them existing within our homelands at a point where we needed to understand and create a workable solution to either coexisting or battling one another. By the tribes recognizing the right of the United States to exist within our homeland, the ones that have received the gifts of sovereignty within our homelands is the United States. The state of Oregon is a subsequent governmental entity that was created under the auspices of that greater agreement where our tribes relinquished the right to claim the lands that we had ceded. But in that, we reserved the rights that we have today. Our leadership did not give up those rights, which existed prior to the creation of the state of Oregon or prior to the ratification of the treaty. Those rights that are encapsulated within our treaty are not gifts, are by no means a gift of the United States, because as far as they have proved by policy over the many years, is that each one of these rights that were retained by our leadership have only been a nuisance and a hurdle by which they have to deal with in a legislative manner. And by our agreement, and as it's encapsulated within the language of the U.S. Constitution, treaties are the supreme law of the land according to Article 2 of the United States Constitution. When we talk sovereignty, we've got to practice it. And whether we are going to stand and defend what our tribal leadership in the 1800s put aside for us, we've got to make a commitment to ourselves and to our community and to our future, whether or not we are going to stand to defend what was reserved for us by our ancestors through that treaty negotiation. Are we willing to do as they had done in the 1855 and 1856 era by taking up arms in order to protect what they knew as their own? Would we be able to challenge ourselves as citizens of our tribal nations to defend what we believe in as tribal nations? There have been many of our tribal members that have taken the oath to the United States government to stand and defend the rights of the to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Well, if we could do that for the United States, why are we not doing that for our tribal governments and our tribal way of life? So if we, truly want to practice and be the epitome of sovereignty, we as tribal governments must know that our power to exist predates the 1855 treaty. But the United States itself has to recognize that they are the beneficiaries and the recipients of the gift of governance that's encapsulated in the treaties of 1855. We as tribes gave the United States those rights. And if anybody is to proclaim the treaty, it should be the non-native population, because by that treaty, it encapsulates them the right to own land, to be existing within our homelands. So those are the things that we need to, teach our children, that by the beneficiaries beneficiary of policies of the United States government and their colonial type of thinking that they're helping us out is their responsibility. And these are the things that I talked about. Sovereignty, because the tribal treaties are what is looked on as in the 1950s as nothing but a nuisance, where these tribal people were unable to govern themselves, to that the great American fathers in Washington, D.C. know the best for us and have the best interests in our mind, whether we know it or not. We have to start taking responsibility for our own communities. And as we go forward into the future, I would propose that our tribal students and our tribal communities, really put it into an educationary type of presentations, that by the treaty and through the sovereignty, the gift of sovereignty was given to the United States and then subsequently farmed out to Oregon and Washington. And it's inherent that all non-native students in Oregon realize that the treaties are what protects their right to exist within tribal homelands. Let me say that again. All Oregon students of non-native lineage must realize and understand that the rights that they are experiencing on an everyday basis, whether it's a right to vote, and whether it's a right to free speech, whether it's a right to education, was recognized by our head men in 1855, and that they, as citizens of Oregon, must protect their rights to these sovereign issues and protect the treaties as they were written. Because if the treaties were to be abrogated in a way, well, it's my contention that by the abrogation of those treaties, that the American community gives up its right to the claiming of those rights that they were graciously gifted by the headmen in 1855 within the homelands of the Umatilla, Cayuse, and Walla Walla tribes here in Eastern Oregon, as well as all the treaty tribes of 1855 through the Isaacs and Stevens treaties that granted the United States to exist within our combined homelands. So whether or not our politicians on the governmental levels at within the state legislatures and whether it's our congressmen in Washington must know that it was not a gift of the United States that we remain on our reservations. It's a gift of our reservations to the United States government that exists within our homelands. And students of Oregon, students of Washington, students of anywhere that's affected by the Isaac Stevens treaties, be aware that the sovereign issues by which our daily lives are governed was actually recognized and given in 1855. My presentation isn't going to be very much longer than that. I would believe that, we are at a point now to begin to reestablish and redefine what we accept and what we can develop as a portrait of sovereignty that we can be able to abide and foster into the future, that the non-native community must understand that we are here since the beginning, we'll be here till the end. So if there are any type of comments that I'd love to have an open discussion in to what sovereignty can mean to you as an individual, what sovereignty can mean to you as an educator, what sovereignty should mean to us as communities. So my presentation is slated to go till another 25 minutes, but I would just like to open up a conversation by which we can bounce these ideas off as we go forward in Senate Bill 13 in how it's going to frame what our ideology can and should be. So this is my understanding of sovereignty in the fact that if we are to move forward, we've got to begin to plant the seeds to know that if we claim sovereignty, we must stand to protect it as well.
Thomas, I'll just step in for Katrina and acknowledge, we've got until 10:45 for the break. If anyone would like to ask Thomas questions or participate in this discussion, go ahead and unmute.
My gee whiz, I must have put everyone to sleep.
No, Thomas, this is Zach Brent. I'm the social studies teacher out at Nikiawe. And I just want to say thank you for sharing that. I think there's a lot of wisdom in what you said about embracing sovereignty and embracing the privilege and the responsibility that comes with that. And I'd like to welcome you out to the classroom to speak with my students when we get back in school and things get rolling again. So I'll be in contact with you to share a similar message if you're willing to do that in the future.
By all means, I would be truly willing to stand and share that with you in class. And that's where it starts. It starts within our own community, because our children need to know what the concept of sovereignty actually means, and self-governance. There are tribes other than our own. I've done extensive traveling through Indian country, and there are certain tribal communities that are unaware of their tribal rights. Such as I was up in the Blackfeet country in Montana, and I just, they're a Stevens Treaty tribe, and I asked them, what is your treaty rights? And then I was told, well, you're going to have to talk to Mr. Earl Old Person, because he's the one that talks about that. But then, but I was thinking, they've got the right to hunt buffalo. It's encapsulated in their treaty. But why do they not use that enumerated right to call for, if they got the right to hunt, why don't they use that right to call for the sustained availability of that treaty resource that was enumerated within their treaty? And they've not, and that could be opening the door for them as well. But my take is that each Oregon student through the Senate Bill 13 must realize that they have privileges granted by that treaty that they have to protect by supporting the treaty language. So thank you, Mr. Branson.
Yeah, thank you again.
Wow. Tak Chicago, Madash. Wake up, y'all.
Thomas? Thomas, why do you think the concept of tribal sovereignty is hard for others to understand? Why is it often viewed as a something special, right, that only the Indians get to do? I mean,
I believe that the concept of sovereignty has not been really truly defined within many of our tribal communities, in that, for many years we were under the auspices of BIA, bossing Indians around. And in that, the policies, where the great American government knows what's best for you, whether you like it or not, this is how it's going to be. But now, as we begin to start moving forward as a community that recognizes community norms, community needs, that's the thing that we have to move forward with. And we cannot truly be sovereign until we take that responsibility to be governed and to govern as a community, because we will speak to many of the needs that we have as a community. And but in order for us to truly make it happen, we're still dependent on the government for the funding. How are we going to develop a monetary stream that's going to support our needs? Business is a big step in the right direction, in that we have to diversify and create a community economy that's going to support our tribal needs and our community needs, that we can take care of our community as a whole. But until we are able to do that, and we have our hands stretched out begging for the the dollar from whatever resource that we can, our sovereignty is limited in many ways. And as tribal governments, we need to begin to start moving in that direction of being able to finance the things that we identify as community needs and goals. And that's one of my perspectives, that we as a, we can never be truly sovereign until we're masters of our own economy. Our elders in the past were wonderful stockmen, the horses that we had in the 1800s, the cattle that our people raised in the 1800s. They were self-sufficient. All of our self-sufficiency means, whether it's herds of horses, herds of cattle, even our farms, the lands that we have, we're not the ones that take care of it. We are not the ones that profit from the resources that we have as individuals. Until we become personally self-sufficient, we cannot expect our communities to be self-sufficient as well. So we're always relying on an outside source.
Thank you.
And we have a comment here. A few years ago, one of our past BOT terms had the thought and idea to create our own tribal license plates. Thank you, Fred, on that one, because yeah, I believe that would be a thing that we can go forward with. And then what we do in that negotiations when we were part of that, try to establish our own Department of Motor Vehicles, we need to negotiate we can do it. We can do it, but then are we going to develop our own Department of Motor Vehicles here on the tribe? Do we have the wherewithal, resources to do that? I would, I'd be a proponent of it, yeah, to show that who we are. If we're going to claim sovereignty, we've got to, begin to take small steps that's going to identify us as a community. And did it ever make it on the agenda? Not on the general council level that I know, but it has been on the board of trustees in some discussions. So I believe that where we need to begin to take the step to establish a department of motor vehicles for the Umatilla tribe would probably be in committee. Maybe a motion on the floor of the general council to begin moving in that direction would be a positive step. Send it to Law and Order Committee and then to the Board of Trustees. How it will be managed and the negotiation that we have to go for, I believe it's called the language. It's been a number of years since that I've been a part of the discussion. But if that's something we can consider as a community and sign of sovereignty, maybe it's something we can pursue.
Do we have any other questions or comments for Thomas?
Please, anyone.
Hi, good morning, Thomas. This is Shondine Jones. I just was going to ask you about your question that you asked earlier, the differentiation of the treaty tribes and the executive order tribes. Do you think, like, in schools, like maybe high school, middle school, my tribe is an executive order tribe, so we don't have like the treaty rights as a treaty tribe they have. So what are your ideas for lessons that differentiate like the differences between treaty tribes and non-treaty tribes, like executive order tribes? Like, are there any ideas that you have?
Well, the concept that I believe that needs to be stressed, because I myself don't know what the real difference between an executive order tribe as opposed to a treaty tribe. As a native person, it wasn't until just a few years ago that I really realized that there's a little bit of uneven considerations because of both, and I really don't understand it to myself. What is encapsulated? What is the executive order as opposed to a treaty tribe? Now, this is something that would be able to shine a little bit of light on it, because even within our tribal communities we have those questions. Myself, I've served as the general council chairman back in 1996, and I've been with the tribe. I was first elected to the board of trustees here on Umatilla Reservation when I was 18. So working through the community and government, from 1981 till say 2015, I didn't realize that there was a difference between an executive order tribe and a treaty tribe. And I don't know how that impacts the communities around us. And that's just a question that I had. What is it? How do we begin to show, or even do we want to? I don't know, because that's something still in my mind that I need to deal with.
Thank you. I was just asking, but thank you for your words. I enjoyed listening to what you had to say earlier.
Well, thank you. And you're from?
I'm enrolled in Walker River Paiute Tribe in Central Nevada, and we are an executive order tribe. So
yeah, there's a whole different thing right there. Like the Nevada tribes, how they got the rancherias and the colonies as opposed to reservations. What is what can be done to strengthen each of these communities? And as just across the border, McDermott in Oregon here, Duck Valley even, is there differentiations between the laws that they have to observe and the laws that we have to observe? And how does it affect our community as a whole within Oregon? And I don't know how to begin to even get a grasp on what the whole differentiation between executive and treaty tribes would be. Man, I must have put everybody to sleep. So if we move on forward.
Well, if nobody else has any questions or comments, going once, going twice, well, then I think we can start the break early. Our next presentation is scheduled for 11. I'm not sure what Bill Tovey's schedule is like, but I think we should leave it at that and assume we're going to pick back up at 11 o'clock. And we can leave the Zoom room open while we're on this break in case anyone wants to discuss or ask any of our presenters anything else. But otherwise, we'll head to break now. And thanks, Thomas.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. So you can start.
All righty. Well, thank you all. And my name's Bill Tovey. I'm the Director of Economic Community Development for the tribe. I've started working for the tribe in 1988. So I've been here quite a long time, seen a lot of positive things happen with the tribe. Go ahead and shift to the next page. So this is the traditional use by the Cayuse, Umatilla, and Walla Walla tribes. You know, the tribe's been around over 10,000 years in this region, and where it's a little bit darker is more our traditional areas, but we did go to Northern California, Reno, Pacific Ocean, Canada, Montana, Idaho. We've covered a lot of areas that, you know, and probably back in the 1600s is when the tribes brought in the horses, and so that just expanded our area of expansion over that time period. Did a lot of, went to Montana for buffalo hunting, you know, Northern California, Nevada for a lot of, did a lot of activity down there. Even one tribe down in Southern Oregon had the same Cayuse language that we have here at Umatilla. That's pretty amazing how that language, two different tribes had the same language and they were so far apart. You can go to the next slide. And what I did was I just provided a lot of maps here, and then I can come back and I've kind of done some verbal comments within the presentation, but it's right now it's for the maps, and then I can get that to Katrina, you know, if she needs to send out to other members of the group. So in 1855, the tribe negotiated a treaty with the U.S. government. Our original ceded area was about 6.4 million acres. The three tribes ceded that to the federal government in exchange for about 250 acre reservation. At that time, it was supposed to be exclusive to the tribes. And the next slide will kind of show the reservation boundaries within the ceded boundaries. So you can see the 1855 described reservation boundary, and then the original ceded lands. And so you can see we're down all the way down to the Snake River, along the with the Idaho, Oregon state line, down in the John Day area, up in Richland, Kennewick area, the Tri-Cities. So he's in Benton, Franklin, Columbia County, and parts of Garfield County. So we had a big area that we lived and thrived in. Next one is our original reservation boundary. And you can see it goes up to Adams, Athena, all the way over toward La Grande area, down Pilot Rock, covered a lot of mountainous areas, some great wheat growing country as well. The next slide shows the dilution of the reservation from that treaty in 1855. First off, they did a survey in 1871 that cut off about a third of the eastern reservation. In 1882, they did the Pendleton notch, more or less, that is mostly the city of Pendleton right now. 1882, again, was Umatilla River, the city of Pendleton. 1888, they diminished the boundaries, and so that reduced it down to about 158,000 acres from the 250,000 at that time. And then in 1934, during the Indian Reorganization Act, they added back 14,000 acres in the Johnson Creek Restoration Area. And that's down, covers part of Indian Lake. It's one of our enterprises. Next up, that was one way of disenfranchising tribes. The second way was through allotments. And in 1885, Oregon pushed for the Slater Act. It was specific to Oregon tribes. And then in 1887, the federal government enacted the Dawes Act, which was specific to, was nationwide regarding all tribes. So what they did was, the reservation was a communally owned, and by doing the allotment acts, they gave, they partitioned land out, and so a male head of household got 160 acres. The females got 80 acres and children got 40 acres. And then all the remaining land that wasn't partitioned out went back to the federal government for non-sale. And that went to the, they had a lot of sales of those lands. If you look at the north part of the reservation, the light yellow area, that's all high, 100 bushel acre wheat ground. So that was never allotted to the tribes. That was held back, and that was sold to the non-Indians. And so that was most of the productive ground on the reservation. I think, and then with that, I'll kind of get into our land program a little bit. So since 1988, the tribes have purchased 77,346 acres. When you look at that, it's square miles. That's about 120 square miles the tribe has purchased over that time period. I wish we could buy it for the pennies that it was sold back in the 1880s, but we paid pretty much fair market value. What this includes is about 42,000 acres of fee parcels, and then almost 34,000 trust parcels. And so there's, I don't want to dive too deep into the differences, but fee parcels are owned in fee, just like your house if you lived in Pendleton, your family farm off reservation, where trust parcels are managed by the federal government for the benefit of the tribal member or the Indian. And so there's, on top of that, you throw all the federal regulatory requirements on that. So it really creates a lot of regulatory hurdles to do anything with your land. The tribe purchased about 43,000 acres using tribal funds, bank loans, contract sales, where we might negotiate with the landowner to pay him a certain amount each year over a 10-year period. And at the end of that 10 years, that land reverts back to the tribe. Then we had a number of federal grants, mostly wildlife mitigation, BPA accords, salmon restoration funds that purchased about 21,000 acres. And a lot of that lands were off reservation. And then finally is the Cobell settlement. A gal named Eloise Cobell, she was from Blackfeet Reservation in Montana. She sued the federal government for mismanagement of tribal trust funds and won a case. And so the BIA could never figure out or do a bank accounting of tribal monies. They tried for years. They brought in a number of different finance companies and bankers, and they couldn't piece together how much money was missing over that time period. And so with that, there's a negotiated settlement with the federal government for a $3.4 billion settlement. And, in today's world, you're talking trillions. This was a lot of money at the time, was $3.4 billion. $1.5 billion went to existing landowners for paying them back what the mismanagement, I guess. I don't think it ever did fully cover that. And then the other 1.9 billion went to what we call a land buyback program, where the federal government wanted to give tribes monies to purchase fractionated interests on the reservation. I'll get into the weeds a little bit on fractionation. Say my great-great-grandfather had 160 acres. And over time, when he passed away, it went to his 2 kids. And then each of them had 3 or 4 kids. And then when they passed away, it went down the chain. And so as time went on, these allotments got really fractionated. Some have over 100 on our reservation nationwide. If you look in the Dakotas, they're up to over 1,000 owners on a piece of allotted property. So that creates even more problems managing that. And so the federal government came back and says, we'll buy these fractionated interests from tribal members, non-tribal members, and then that will become a part of the tribe's land base to manage better, and it reduces that fractionation. We look back in the mid-90s and was working on a easement across the reservation, Northwest Pipeline, and we're negotiating that easement. And at the time, we found out that over 50% of our allotted landowners were not tribal members. They were Indians from other reservations, Yakima, Warm Springs, Nez Perce, Colville, a number of other different reservations. So getting back to the land buyback program, we were one of the first. I think we were the tied with Coeur d'Alene Tribe for the third to have the land buyback come to the Umatilla Reservation. And so in 2014, they came for the first time. We talked to them and they came back again in 2017. And right now they're here for the third time. We're the only tribe in the nation that's had land buyback at their reservation 3 times. And so they're here again. Over that time period, we've purchased about 12,000 acres of fractionated interests. What that does is the land comes to the tribe, the individual gets that payment for the land. Over the long term, it's supposed to solve a lot of the management problems of getting leases signed, building homes, those type of things on reservation land. Next slide is some of the off-reservation properties we've purchased. A lot of these were purchased with wildlife mitigation or BPA Accords funding. And I can kind of go through some of the top 7 properties. Of off-reservation, we purchased about 27,000 acres. The big one is Rainwater, which is in Columbia County, north of the reservation. That's about 11,000 acres. Next up is Wheelhouse, which doesn't show up on this map, but it's between the current today's reservation and the Johnson Creek restoration to the south. We've purchased about 5,300 acres in that area. The Wanapa purchase is over by Hermiston. It's by the state prison, Port of Umatilla. There's of that, it's about 195 acres of industrial properties. We're working on solar project. We're working with Amazon on some water and connectivity over there for one of their data centers. McCoy Meadows is down around La Grande area, is about 2,600 acres. fourth property is about 2,000 acres, and that's about around the Johnson Restoration area. And then Glad is about 920 acres, and that's on our eastern border, going up Meacham Creek. And then the final one that we're looking at is hopefully in the near term, we'll get about 4,000 acres, part of the Umatilla Army Depot over at the crossroads between I-84 and 82. And you've probably seen it. It has the big bunkers over there, but we're working with Columbia Development Authority, which is the two ports of Morrow and Umatilla County, the Umatilla and Morrow counties, and the tribe. There's a five-person group on that. And with that, it's a lot of information, and hopefully I'm fairly clear on it, but I can take questions. I know Thomas has questions.
On the, now that you've singled me out there, Bill, in since we're doing this on the Senate Bill 13, what would something that would come from your department that would talk about the impact of, I would say, misguided policy that if affected our tribes and how it could be mitigated in the future, such as the Slater Act and the subsequent Dawes Acts. And when we're dealing with SB13, we're going to be looking to develop a statewide curriculum that's going to be taught to all students in Oregon. And how would we posture ourselves to say that as a tribal entity, that we're trying to protect ourselves from any type of governmental misguided encroachment in the future, and how could the Oregon students that are going to be given this type of classroom instruction, how would they go about ensuring that the tribes are not negatively impacted in the future?
That's a good question. I always think back when I was younger, coming to Pendleton with my mom and being born and raised in southern Idaho. You'd come up here and most homes were like trailer homes, mobile homes, and you always wondered why that was, and it's because of the allotment issues and fractionation. It's because of the federal government or banks not able to lend on trust property. And so the banks could lend to buy a mobile home to put on trust property, but they couldn't affix that to the trust property. And so, that really affected, after World War II, everybody's building houses, could get a house built for $15,000, $20,000. And that was kind of the American dream. And that kind of passed up the tribe because of this fractionation and the federal government ownership of that property. And so that's the type of things I wouldn't want to happen. Less regulation, the better. Before we started the land program, that was the only way we could manage growth on the reservation, was to regulate, because we didn't have the money to buy that property. Now that we're able to buy it, there's just so many regulations that hinder our development on the reservation.
And one of the questions I have, you're with the Department of Economic Development, and we are developing through SB13, Senate Bill 13, is the impetus to create a statewide teaching system that will, impact white kids in urban areas, white kids in southwestern Oregon that have no idea of anything native except for things that they see on TV and things that are shared stereotypes, such as all you Indians get free money from the government, and you as an economic developer and an economic situated person that, how do we, what can we do to develop these type of non-native people to overcome these negative stereotypes?
Okay, that's a good question. That's boy, it's hard to change people's how they were taught and grown up. Boy, we run into it a lot working with trying to bring companies to Pendleton. They're concerned about our, that we oversee management and regulatory on the reservation, and they're fearful of changes of the Board of Trustees is a fear of theirs. There are changes of dealing with the federal government on reservations, where they can go into the city of Pendleton. They only have to deal with the city of Pendleton rules. They understand those a lot better. So we've got to adopt the type of processes that people are familiar with. And that's hard to say that we have to, we want to be different than the outside world, but we've got to be somewhat similar. Examples are uniform commercial codes, where, you can go in and you can file liens on properties. Well, you can't lien trust property. And so we've got to figure out ways that are similar. A lot of things we'll try to do is set up codes that are Umatilla specific, but tie in really closely with state or federal codes or regulations. But for, the question is, how do we teach kids, that we're different? That's a tough one for me too.
This is Antone. I got a comment.
Okay, Antone.
All the tribes have seated areas, and they all overlap. Prior to the creation of Indian reservations, there was always this working together, the tribes, and I'm just asking, do the four tribes or the other tribes around Umatilla, like Yakima, Nez Perce, Warm Springs, Bannock, Spokane, do they all work together or talk together when the land issues come up? Because there are a lot of opportunities, and right now I think the tribes are in the process of making the federal government honor their treaty rights. So I think there's a lot of opportunity over time there and buyback is just kind of one of those spin-offs that the government is doing to honor those treaty rights. So I just wanted to know if you guys are working together. That's all.
Yeah. Well, that's a good question, Antone. I think, you know, probably through ATNI or Affiliated Tribes Northwest Indians is probably the most we work together. You know, an example is of where we don't work together is where Colville's wanting to purchase some land down Pasco area and looking at a casino or some other development. You know, that's on the other side of the river. That's not really CTUIR ceded territory, but it's right in that area. It's more Yakima ceded lands. And, you know, so from a money perspective, tribes don't really show their hands too much, especially if you look at the Pacific, the tribes up Seattle area. They're in competition with each other because they're 15, 20 miles away. And so they're in competition for that gambling dollar. We've worked with Oregon tourism quite a bit. We did a book on all the Oregon tribes, and that was pretty successful. But again, it was the tribes leading the charge, where the casinos didn't want to work as well with that because it's more of a competition between tribal casinos than it is with tribal tribes themselves. What are good examples?
Well, the point is, I think that the tribes need to begin coming together more so that they can leverage with their treaty rights that they do have, or the rights that they have in their ceded territories. There's a lot there, but you just have to, I think, have a plan in order to do that. And it's like Umatilla tribes are working with the Nez Perces in the Wallowa area.
Right.
And the Nez Perces at one time were supporting the Umatilla's CTUIR for acquisition in the Wallowa area. But I think that opportunities are there, whether it's for water, for timber, for game, for fish, or whatever. There's a better chance that we will all benefit from the win-win, not only the tribes but all the other people, communities. So I just think that they need to have a better outlook. Like with Umatilla, we couldn't have no economy without the whole community supporting us.
Right.
That's all. We need leadership there at that higher level.
Yeah. Yeah, in some years it's good, you know, where all the four chairmen get along good, or then others it's a hit and miss, really. You know, and even dealing with other tribes that we did a lot of work with Warm Springs early on, and they were kind of the gem of the Northwest, and they've fallen on hard times. They've got rid of all their economic development people. Yakimas, we haven't as much. Nez Perce, we have Spokane, Coeur d'Alene's, we've done a lot of work with. If you look down Shoshone-Bannock down at Fort Hall, we haven't worked with a lot. So it's kind of hit and miss of leadership and direction tribes are going.
Hey, Bill, it's Fred Hill.
Mr. Hill, good
Good to
afternoon.
see you today.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I was just curious. I know it almost feels like a GC question, but I was just kind of curious about. I know that Coyote Park South, there's been a building set up there, and what if there's been any other opportunities for other tribal or businesses that have inquired about that, and if there was even other locations for that consideration, for our tribe's economic development, areas.
Mhm.
So that's my question.
Okay. We've had a number of contacts with people. We've went through, and there's a number of steps you have to do. It's mostly right off the bat, you meet with somebody that's interested, you do a non-disclosure agreement, so you can provide information back and forth. At that point, then you get into developing the lease and then start construction. We have a number of non-disclosures, but we haven't got any leases. Some of the biggest hurdles we run into is just the financing. If you look at the preparedness building we built, that's about $2.5 million for a 10,000 square foot building. Most people we've dealt with that's way above their price range. You get larger companies that come in that can do those type of projects. We're looking into, mostly it's storage type facilities. We've had some appliance, like tractors, combine, look at the area. We've had some USDA type slaughter facilities. And one of the big things we got to watch out for is the smell. It's southwest. That's the way the wind blows mostly here. That goes directly to the casino, so we can't have anything smelly down that way. And so we've had some trucking companies looking at distribution. We're kind of the hub of the Northwest, is what I always say. We're between Portland, Boise, Spokane, and Seattle. The first three were about 200 to 210 miles, and then Seattle's about 280 miles. So we're kind of in that region. So that's kind of on the south side. On the north side, it's more working with small business on incubators or building shops. We've had, I'd say, 20 coffee shop type facilities, or people come and want to do a coffee facility. And when they start looking at putting in the infrastructure, the asphalt, the requirements they need, it comes up to $500,000, and that's way above what they could make ever selling all the coffee they could. So there's some barriers there, but we're trying to break those barriers.
Yeah.
Quick question there, Mr. Bill, if I may.
Okay.
The Umatilla tribe right now is in a unique situation, and as we go forward with this developing a learning strategy for area and the students once again, We are unique in the point that we can be considered both a Oregon and Washington tribe. You know, so then how could we frame and begin to start? Because what we're doing is taking some of the first steps to start educating non-native youth to the uniqueness of tribes throughout throughout Oregon. And whereas, you know, they may look across the river and see tribes up in the Puget Sound and realizing that there are 29 tribes in Washington, and that there are 9 in Oregon. And what could we, as a regional player in this development of these type of educational policies, can we begin to start developing for ourselves as both an Oregon tribe and a Washington tribe? And where would that benefit us?
Right. Yeah, for Washington, we're part of the, we're not one of the 29 tribes, but we're tied in with their governor, tribal nations relationship. And so I know board members and our legal go to their annual meetings, some similar to the Oregon tribes meetings we hold every year. And if you look at our land base in Washington, we're in the top, I think, 7 largest land-based tribes in Washington. You know, so we're, you know, you have Yakima, Spokane, Colville, and I think Lummi's up there. But there's only a couple others that have a larger land base than we have in the state of Washington. And so, yeah, that's a very good point. You know, we're working on getting rainwater into doing a feed of trust, which would probably be the largest in the ever completed in the United States. And so working with the Columbia County commissioners on that, you know, where we have to, I think they're favorable to doing that, but they want to get, you know, monies for their weed control, fire district, those type of things. They want to make sure that they're whole at the end. And so that's really important to build those relationships with those communities that that we don't deal with every day. We're buying all our supplies from their stores within those communities, and we're trying to become a part of that community. And so I think we've got to expand out to other communities and do something similar when we purchase land in those areas. One thing that's very difficult is purchasing land off reservation and being able to manage it. You know, for natural resources, they can do something like that because they've got such a large workforce. They have upwards of 200 employees, where you look at my land staff and we have 10. And so we can't go managing land at Rainwater and Wanacott and then over La Grande area and spread your base out too far. Did that answer your question, or I went off on a tangent there?
But we are recognized as one of the largest tribal land ownership concerns in Washington as well now.
I think it's about number 7 or
Wow.
8. Yeah, yeah.
This is Antone. Make a comment. You know, with land acquisition, whether it's in Wallowa or up in Rainwater, there are other things that go with that, like with water and land. I mean, there are other kinds of interests that are with that go along with that, and like in Wawawa, there's a lake, but there's all the wildlife and stuff that goes along with that. And I think that that has to be considered when making an acquisition. It's not just making a purchase. You're buying a lot of stuff there that's a part of the tribe's interests, and that we will manage it, whether it's water or wildlife or trees or whatever it could be, and continue to build on that. But I just think that it's not just land, it's much, much, much more than that. That's all.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you, Bill. Does anybody have any questions? 1, 2, 3. Okay. So we're scheduled to have our lunch break at 11:45 and return at 1 o'clock. Thank you again, Bill, for being with us today and presenting and informing and educating us, the teachers and the community as well, I see on here today. So thank you very much.
All right, Katrina, thank you. Anytime you need me, give me a call.
All righty. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
All right.